Hello, and welcome to another video log. This one is going to be of a still life image. I'm quite enjoying still life images at the moment, and I'm really sort of getting back into the feel of making them and creating them, because it's really quite a creative process from actually arranging everything and then actually taking the picture. I'm using a daylight studio. I'm using the word studio in inverted commas. Really, it's a window and then a space next to the window to get the light source. The reason I'm doing this is I want to sort of work a bit more natural light than with flash at the moment, as I sort of start understanding again still life and start really sort of getting back into it again. So this is just an image of some baubles that we had in the house still after Christmas, and it's one of these sort of IKEA sticks that it's attached to, and I had some black card as the black background. And the shot you can see here is the basic exposure. There are a lot of things I did wrong in the setup, but I really liked the composition and the sort of graphic nature of this image. So I loaded it into Adobe Camera Raw, and the first thing I did was just to crop the image, just to try to find the best way around the image. I did a lot of work actually in Raw on this one. Mainly because there were some things I wanted to do in Photoshop, but they were just going to be like sort of finishing touches and finesses and things like this. So I just, first of all, just sort of looked at the exposure. I had a little bit of a problem. I was getting this spot for some reason on all the exposures. I looked at my lens, and my lens is okay, so I don't really know what it is. It could have been a bit of dust at the time. I just don't really know. So I just was trying to make sure that I could sort of limit the amount of healing and cleaning I had to do on that as much as possible. I want to also keep the background black, but obviously not lose any details in the baubles of any sort of shadows that there are. Also, the other thing I wanted to have a strong color in the baubles themselves. Because at the moment I'm just really going through and just taking the settings just to get sort of the basic I need. I went through and did the normal detail adjustments. Capture sharpening is one major one. Reducing the noise, another one. It was shot at 80 ISO, but even actually at 80 ISO, it's unbelievable how much noise you actually get. And I think the funny thing is, when I see this shots from this camera and shots from my older cameras, and I look at the noise levels, you actually do see the big difference that camera manufacturers have made in actually reducing noise, removing noise. I'm really here just looking at the difference of spaces to see how the noise adjustment is affecting the whole image. And then, as you can see, there's that huge horrible spot, which I'm going to have to look at in a minute. I just sorted up the lens profile in Camera Raw, which I found quite useful to remove any sort of defects and distortions from the lens. This is a shot of my G10. Quite a strange camera for use for a studio shot, but I actually quite like it for the sort of studio work, because it has a big screen on the back that you can really see. If I was to do studio work really seriously, I would definitely get a 10.8 or a 5.4 camera, and I would be developing my own films. Maybe it's something I should be looking at to do in the future. It'd be quite cool. There's quite this quick complicated mark here. I'm not sure. I think I just don't know what it is. There's just so much stuff when I looked at these things, and I just didn't know what they were. I was listening to a talk the other day, and the photographer said that asked people how many times they had ever come back with no marks on their images, and he asked people to raise their hands. Of course, no one raised their hand, and he said, "No, me neither." And it is true that when all images need cleaning. Dust gets everywhere. I know, it's amazing how much dust gets there. So I'm really sort of trying to look at how to clean this. I'm not quite sure what to do. It's trying to find these good place to clone the things. In the end, I think I just settled with having it just roughly right, and then I could go in if I needed to and clean in Photoshop. So here I'm just sort of checking the exposure, seeing how much a change in the exposure would actually change the black in the background. I don't want it to go too light. That's the real problem. I'm just zooming in, just looking at the different shades of black, you could say. Obviously, you don't want to clip too much. This is the other sort of thing I sort of worry about, is clipping a bit too much. Now I just went through, and if there's also any sort of like obvious spots, I just sort of quickly cleaned it. Now, the next step, actually, the first thing I did in Photoshop as well is clean. There's quite a little bit of cleaning in this, but it's because I wanted to have a very sort of smooth feel to the image. Also, when you're working with glass, I washed each of the baubles. I mean, taking the bauble completely apart, washing it, and drying it, and then putting it on. And then every time I touched them, I was then cleaning the glass again. I was very, very sort of paranoid about having different having fingerprints on the glass. So I'm just sort of looking really and just seeing if I've got everything I need to. Obviously, I work with smart objects, so if I do have to drop out, I can sort of work on it a little bit again and come back in. I think smart objects are great. I think there's a lot more work though Photoshop could actually, or even Adobe could do, working on smart objects. Because I think there's quite a lot of, if you could layer in a smart object easier, it would be quite nice instead of having to like open through all the time. It'd be quite nice. So I came back into Photoshop. And I just duplicated the layer there, and this is going to be working a bit quicker. And duplicating the layer, I then used the clone tool, and I was using the layer as a place to paint on the new details. I was going quite close, just little things that I just didn't really like. I thought about removing all these little hairs, but then I didn't really like it too much, the sort of effect. So then I started going around and sort of removing things I didn't really like to see. Yeah, there's this sort of silver wire in the Baul Baul, so I just decided to quickly remove it in a way, just to sort of give it a nicer, cleaner feel on the glass, so you don't actually see these sort of little things. So I'm cloning from both sides. That's the way I'm cloning. Probably the best way to clone, I feel. So a lot of this now is literally just looking and then going in and looking and going in and looking. And once I'm happy, I just create the smart object. And then I just do a quick little levels adjustment. Made some minor curves adjustments. Really, really minor. It's nothing too much. And I had this idea of using something which I called ultra color. I don't know where I got this from. It's been in one of my sort of editing journals, as I call it. And it must be from when around CS1 I wrote it originally. But I thought I'd try it out here. It boosts the color. And so we do is duplicate a layer, set it as overlay or soft light, convert it to lab mode, and then auto levels channel A and B. And then you sort of get this extreme sort of saturated version. What I then did is I then duplicated that saturated version back into my RGB layer with my smart object, and then adjusted the colors with hue and saturation. It's a really nice effect because it actually does sort of make colors just become this sort of ultra vivid sort of color, oversaturated. But with oversaturation, it's still more fluorescent the green has become as well. I sort of worked a little bit just to make sure that the magenta wasn't a bit overkill. I then put that and the previous smart object into a new smart object, so that's a double smart object there. And I then reduced noise, which you're going to see quickly now. And I just did some sharpening. And the next thing I was thinking about was actually what would be quite good is if we can sort of have like some light on these baubles. So I decided to actually use the render lights tool. It's the first time I've used it in quite a while, and it's changed from CS5 to CS6. But it actually looks quite nice as well. So I added these two light sources on the baubles. What it actually has done is actually worked quite well in the composition of the image, bringing the attention to the baubles and less so much on the curvature of the stick. But I also worked on this as well. I was just having a think now, just what to do next. I think what I was really thinking about how I was like going to sort of balance this stick back in, and also work on the saturation. So I reduced the saturation by using the vibrance tool, and I then used the new layer edit fill with 50% gray. Used a soft brush and low opacity. And what I did is I just sort of painted in where I wanted more light, in a way, because when I used the render lights filter, I had removed quite a bit of light, actually, quite a brightness. Maybe I should put brightness more in the stick. So I was a little bit, thinking about that. I also decided that I would have the vibrance set, but I'd actually only remove it on. I'd only actually have it on the. I wouldn't have. Sorry, I would be masking out the baubles basically, just so the stick had a bit more color to it than this sort of black and white. And this is the final image, which I think I really like it. I think it's quite a nice image, and it will work really well for maybe Christmas next year, or this year, to sort of work with some more images like this. For me, it's a very fluid image. The black in the background works very well to sort of create some sort of negative space which you can sort of the baubles can flow in. I also like the idea of the composition of having the bauble, the second one actually just tucked onto the end, because it sort of looks like a bauble tree in my lounge, with these sort of baubles hanging off these white sticks, and I thought that just would make it quite organic. Using the render lights tool really sort of made the image for me, because I was working with just daylight. Being able to use such things just to add in a little bit more light creatively afterwards is quite nice, but I wouldn't like to rely on it too heavily and too much. I hope you enjoyed the image. Please head over to my blog. It's aperture64.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at aperture64, and I also have a Facebook page, which is Facebook, and then it's aperture64, but instead of 64 at the end, you actually have to write 64. Unfortunately, somebody had already taken that. But I think everything else is aperture64, just the numbers 6 and 4. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions about how I made it, or something a bit more detailed, I'll make a post about it. But thanks a lot. I hope to catch you next week. Bye bye.